Dear participants from all over the country, greetings from Guru Nanak Center for Research, Guru Nanak College Autonomous, Velachery, Chennai. We welcome you all to the final day of the 5-day Industry Academia Conclave on Aquaculture, Avenues, Opportunities and Challenges. I would like to request Dr. Avai Kode ma'am, Associate Professor and Head PG Research Department of Commerce, Guru Nanak College, to kindly deliver the welcome address for today's talk titled Coastal Aquaculture in India, Changing Priorities with Changing Times. Ma'am, please.
Research is the systematic investigation and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. The Guru Nanak Center for Research is doing an excellent job by focusing on research relating to diverse areas and disciplines. A very good afternoon to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our most revered General Secretary and Correspondent, Mr. Manjit Singh Nair in absentia, and our most respected principal, Dr. M.G. Raghunathan, who has been a great source of inspiration behind every activity of Guru Nanak College. I extend a warm welcome to the resource person of the day, Mr. Jaideep Kumar, editor and publisher, Aquaculture Outlook, Chennai, who is going to give a talk on coastal aquaculture in India, changing priorities with changing times. I heartily welcome our young and energetic Dean Research, Dr. J. Jayanti, who has been continuously organizing a variety of research programs along with her team in the most effective manner. I also welcome our Vice Principal, Dr. LRS Kalanidhi, Dean Academics, Dr. Savitri, Deans of other schools, Dr. Rajeshri, heads of various departments, faculties from Guru Nanak College and other colleges, researchers and participants from all over the country. I am sure to all the participants with the Industry Academy and I thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your warm words of welcome. Though our speaker needs no introduction, as a formality, I request Mr. Sendil Vairavan, Assistant Professor, Department of Advanced Zoology and Animal Biotechnology, to kindly introduce our chief guest to the participants. Sir, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Am I audible, sir?
Well, sir.
Very good afternoon to everyone who have gathered here in this platform for this Industry Academia Conclave 2020 on avenues, opportunities, and challenges in aquaculture, organized by Guru Nanak Center for Research, Guru Nanak College. Today, we have in our midst a very renowned resource person, Mr. Jaideep Kumar, who is an editor and publisher of Aquaculture Outlook, to share his experience on coastal aquaculture in India with changing priorities and changing times. Mr. Jaideep has completed his master's degree in mariculture from Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute, Kochi. During his tenure as a project director in RGCA, he has successfully implemented and completed the selective breeding program of gift tilapia in collaboration with the World Fish Center, Malaysia. He also played a key role in the establishment and operation of two pioneering projects, that is, the Aquatic Quarantine Facility for Vanami at Chennai and the Broodstock Multiplication Center for Vanami at Visakhapatnam. As a leading aquaculture consultant, he has collaborated with various farms and hatcheries across the country and extended his technical support for the successful production of seeds. Some of his achievements are: he has an excellent track record in the production of top quality tiger shrimp seed and seeds in quality control, achieved a maximum production of 13.8 meter per hectare per crop of black tiger shrimp and 11 meter per hectare per crop of white shrimp, achieved over 90% success rate in farm production and profitably consistently over the years in spite of loose shell syndrome as well as white spot syndrome viruses. So in his career, he is directly involved in the production of 30,000 metric tons of shrimp. So with more than 28 years of experience in aquaculture, he has immense exposure in all segments of the industry, right from the site evaluation for aquaculture, preparation of feasibility studies, supervision of farm construction to technical and administrative management of large-scale shrimp hatcheries and farms in the coastal areas of Andhra Pradesh in India. Now, I welcome Mr. Jaideep to share his experience to the audience. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Respected Dr. Raghunathan, Principal, Guru Nanak's College, Vice Principal, Dr. Kalanidhi, Dr. Avai Kote Madam, Dr. Jayanti, Dean of Research and HOD Zoology in Guru Nanak's College, and deans of other faculties in the college, students, and all the participants in this webinar. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be able to make this presentation. So I think I'll start right away. Are you able to see the presentation, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I request our participants to kindly pin Aquaculture Outlook, the icon Aquaculture Outlook, for the clear view of the presentation. Kindly pin Aquaculture Outlook. Yes, sir. You can go ahead, sir.
Okay, I'll begin my presentation with a brief introduction about the scenario, aquaculture scenario in the world, and the evolution of coastal aquaculture in India. I'll also touch upon the factors that contributed to this growth, the present status of aquaculture in India, and the change in priorities with changing times. So as you're all aware, aquaculture is one of the fastest growing food production sectors in the world that contributes about 30% to the global food production. The growth in both 2017 and 18 was estimated to be between 3 to 4% in terms of volume. And it has a predicted compounded annual growth rate of 4.46% until the year 2022. It is estimated that by the year 2030, the world would eat 20% more fish, or 30 million tons of live equivalent, than it ate in the year 2016. And in 2030, the aquaculture production is projected to reach about 109 million tons. One of the most important facts is that aquaculture is considered as one of the most sustainable option of food production when compared to other production systems. So this is a slide that I got from the Global Aquaculture Advocate, which compares the greenhouse gas emissions of farmed salmon as well as cattle production. You can see very clearly that the carbon dioxide production is about 7 times more in cattle, nitrogen 4 times more, and phosphorus 2.5 times more. This slide shows you the quantity of feed and fresh water that is required to produce about 1 kg of meat. You can see that in cattle, you require about 8 kilograms of feed and about 7 tons of water to produce 1 kilogram of meat. And in swine, it is about 3 kilos of feed and 3 tons of water. In poultry, it is about 2 kilos of feed and 1 ton of water. It has come down a little bit. Feed requirement has come down a little bit with selective breeding and fast growth. Whereas in shrimp, here to about 1.8 kilograms of feed required, but that also has come down now. We can produce shrimp for as less as 1.2 or 1.3 kilograms and about 1.6 tons of fresh water. In salmon, the quantity of feed required is lesser, 1.5 kilos, and only 121 liters of fresh water is required. And you can see for mollusks like clams and oysters and mussels, feed is absolutely not required, because these are filter feeders, and if placed strategically, they can filter out algae and food organisms from the water itself. So without the requirement of feed, it can produce biomass, and no fresh water is required for these mollusks. If we look at the world fisheries and aquaculture production, you can see that The capture fisheries has been remaining stagnant, say from the mid-80s. It has not been growing at all and has been stationary, whereas both aquaculture, both inland aquaculture as well as coastal aquaculture has been growing steadily over the years. Today, coastal aquaculture contributes about 47% to the total fisheries production of about 100 and close to about 180 million tons. Aquaculture contributes about 80 million tons. And when we look at the aquaculture production scenario in India, here too, right over the last 4 decades, the growth in aquaculture has been tremendous. Freshwater aquaculture has grown leaps and bounds during this period. It is over 6.5 million metric tons now. Similarly, brackish water aquaculture, mainly shrimp, that has grown tremendously over the last decade. It is now over 8 lakh metric tons per year. Marine aquaculture, however, or mariculture, however, has not really taken off, and it is a non-entity at the moment with very little production. But there is immense potential for mariculture to grow in the country in the coming years. Looking at global farm shrimp production, you can see the growth of India. It is the blue band in the bottom. So it has been growing steadily since the introduction of exotic shrimp banami in India in the year 2009. And in 2019, the growth, the production was around 8 lakh metric tons. It could go a little lesser this year because of this COVID pandemic. So just looking at these, we see that India has registered a tremendous growth in aquaculture production over the last 2 decades. It is ranked second overall in world fish production after China. That is third in capture fisheries and second in aquaculture. Annual fish production in India is over 9 million metric tons. The contribution of fisheries to the gross domestic product of India is around 1%, and fisheries contributes about 5.2% to the total agricultural GDP in India. The per capita fish availability is about 9 kilograms per head. India is presently considered as a sleeping giant because of the enormous untapped potential that the country has to enhance the fisheries and aquaculture production. I'll now briefly describe how coastal aquaculture has grown in India over the years. Till the late 80s, mostly it was traditional systems of aquaculture that was practiced. And this was mostly focused in Kerala and West Bengal, Berries in West Bengal, and Chemmenkettu in Kerala. They were the water bodies that were doing aquaculture of a very extensive kind or traditional systems of aquaculture. These were basically tide-based systems, and it was a sort of polyculture kind of system with both shrimp and different varieties of shrimp and different varieties of fish entering into the system. Shrimp farming also had made a little progress with the crop rotation being done between paddy and shrimp farming in some areas of Kerala. And towards the end of the 80s, it was actually organizations like MPIDA and CMFRA, MPIDA, the Marine Products Export Development Authority. They worked a great deal in popularizing shrimp culture. Their field staff went all across the country in all coastal areas of the country and promoted shrimp farming. CMFRA too played a major role, especially in developing hatchery technology of shrimp for shrimp, and then giving consultancy and training programs to stakeholders, early stakeholders. Finfish farming all these years was a non-entity. There was no organized finfish farming anywhere in the country. So traditional system of shrimp farming, it basically involved collection of wild seed. At different times of the year, seed from the sea used to enter into rivers and other water bodies. And there were specialized seed collectors who used to collect the seed and then hand it over to farmers. So certain farmers stock the seed given by them directly into the ponds, while others used to stock them in nursery ponds, because whatever the seed that was collected from the wild had got 2 or 3 species of shrimp. Sometimes even some varieties of fish used to enter into these ponds. So several of them, of the farmers in that period, resorted to stocking them in nursery pond, rearing them for say 1 gram or so, and then transferring them to grow out pond. At that time, indigenous farm prepared feed was basically used, as pelleted feed was not available in India early on. Though it was there in other countries, it was not available in India. So most of the farmers resorted to preparing feed with locally available ingredients such as trash fish, then other carbohydrates like and rice bran and things like that. So all this was mixed, and then feeding was done in mud pots and ponds. So inside the pond, several mud pots, small mud pots that we now use for cooking. So such pots were used, and feed was put in these ponds, and these pots were spread all over the pond. So there was no mechanization in that time except for some diesel pumps to fill in water into the tanks. Some of the tanks were tide fed as well. We did not have any aeration at that time, and there was little or no water exchange done during the early part of shrimp farming. It was extensive system of farming with very low stocking densities, say 2 to 3 pieces per meter square. So the whole thing was very labor intensive, because you had to prepare feed, and then you had to get into the pond, keep all the feed inside in small mud pots. So it was a labor intensive operation at that point of time. And let's have a look at what are the reasons that contributed to the growth of shrimp farming or coastal aquaculture in India over these years. So there are some key factors that happened progressively one after another, and that really helped India to register such a huge growth in aquaculture production over these years. The first one is advances made in hatchery technology. As I informed you, CMFRI had developed hatchery technology for shrimp, and then they had provided training and consultancy services to several government organizations and private entities who wanted to start hatcheries. At this time, MPIDA also brought in hatchery technology from abroad. And then there was tremendous improvement in farming systems. Farmers moved from extensive kind of shrimp farming to semi-intensive kinds of shrimp farming, and then later on to more advanced systems of farming that we will see. And then development and availability of pellet feeds, advances in nutrition. As I told you, we did not have any pellet feeds initially. Then some multinationals had established feed mills in India. There were other companies who also used to import feed from other countries into India. Several advances were also made in nutrition aspects of shrimp that we will see in detail a little later. Mechanization also greatly happened. New kinds of aeration systems, automatic feeders, auto harvesters, water quality monitoring devices, all contributed to the growth of aquaculture. There was also advances made in disease diagnosis, because we had faced lots of diseases, and then we didn't know until the disease actually stuck and we saw symptoms in animals for the first time. And by that time, it was too late to do anything. There used to be mass mortalities, or we had to resort to harvesting. Production of SPF stocks. The major growth actually came after the introduction of SPF stocks. You heard about SPF yesterday in Dr. Ramani's presentation. It stands for specific pathogen-free stocks. So introduction of SPF stocks actually contributed to the growth of shrimp aquaculture in India. And then selective breeding, where performance of stocks were greatly enhanced over the years. With regard to hatchery technology, as you all know, eye stalk ablation was one of the key factors that helped in hatchery technology evolve to such a great extent. And then these were also supported by mass algal culture systems, Artemia hatching systems. Then, as I told you, hatchery seed production, CMFRA played a major role in developing hatchery technology. Empida imported hatchery technology from two leading companies, one in the US and one in France. Two hatcheries were established one each in Andhra Pradesh and in Orissa. So after supplying a lot of seed to the growing sector initially, Empida also undertook training programs of professionals in hatchery management. Hundreds and hundreds of technical people were trained in hatchery seed production. Empida also extended consultancy to several entrepreneurs who wanted to start hatchery operations. So that actually triggered, and several hatcheries came up from a handful of hatcheries in the late 80s. Today we have over 500 shrimp hatcheries across the country. Technology for hatchery seed production also came in from Taiwan when some of the hatchery operators decided to bring in technical personnel from or experts in hatchery seed production from countries like Taiwan and Indonesia. Today, hatchery technology is well established in India, and we are one of the most successful, or hatcheries are the best equipped in terms of infrastructure, as well as quality seed production with very little disruptions compared to other countries. With regard to farming, there was a strategic shift from extensive farming systems to semi-intensive systems assisted by scientific progress. Very well-designed ponds came up in elevated areas. There was advances in water pumping and distribution systems, feeder canal networks, gravity flow. Lot of progress in the engineering front was made in farm designing and construction. Water exchange and drainage systems, central drainage systems also started as early as in the early 90s. Aeration systems, paddle wheel aerators were there initially. Then there was a lot of design improvement over the years. Air injectors came up, and today we also have blower systems that give uninterrupted aeration to the ponds. Water quality monitoring systems also came up. Automated feeding systems also came up in shrimp farming. And then over the period, or one of the latest advances that we have now is multi-stage aquaculture system, where we have a separate nursery phase. So you have a hatchery phase where hatchery seed is produced. Then the hatchery seed is stocked in a separate nursery system. And then they are reared in a nursery for a specific period of time. There are several advantages that a nursery system offers. And then it goes to the grow phase, which is a very short phase. And so more number of crops can be taken when this method is adopted. And there is a lot of focus also on biosecurity in recent times, which has contributed to the growth. So this is a picture of a shrimp farm with biosecurity in the form of bird nets. Aeration systems are there, and it is a lined pond. This is the view of another shrimp farm. It is abroad. And new systems, as I mentioned before, indoor nurseries have come up that supported the farming systems to a great deal. More and more nurseries have come up in the country over the last 2 to 3 years. Nurseries or flow-through system nurseries are there. We also have biofloc-based nursery systems. Even RAS-based nursery systems have been established by a couple of hatcheries. We also have polythene-lined ponds in several parts of the country now. This is a picture of an indoor shrimp farm of CP Foods. This is also not in India, but abroad. So basically, these are all the advances in shrimp farming that have been made over the years, which has contributed to this growth. Coming to the feed technology, as I informed, in the late 80s, there were no feed companies in India. Then a few multinationals, they established plans. Earlier, whenever in our early days of farming, whenever a consignment of feed used to come to a particular area, there used to be queues, farmers standing in queue to buy feed from such people. So there was feed import as well as local feed plants were established. And then gradually, when aquaculture increased, several feed plants came up, several multinationals, several local companies have also come up. And today we have, while our requirement of shrimp feed is about 1.2 to 1.5 million tons per annum, our capacity is over 2.2 to 2.5. So we have much excess capacity in feed production in India. During this period, also have been several advances in feed equipment. Extrusion system has come up. So the quality of feed that comes in is very advanced these days. Advances were also made in feed formulation over the years. Presently, the nutritional requirements of farmed animals are understood better. A lot of studies have been done by several leading institutes across the world, which has made this possible. And earlier formulations were based on total crude protein required, so total carbohydrates and total fat, total protein. That was the basis of nutritional requirement of an animal. Today, it has gone to the amino acid level, and we have excellent software that is available in feed formulation. So many factors are considered while formulating feed: the cost, the digestibility of the feed, anti-nutritional factors. All these are considered so that feed of the best quality can be prepared. There is also a lot of awareness in the sector with regard to the dependence on fish meal and fish oil, which is considered not very sustainable these days. So new ingredients are coming up: worms, black soldier fly, algal oil replacing fish oil. So there is a lot of work in feed production towards sustainability. The performance of feeds has also greatly improved over the years. We have getting faster growth and better FCRs now. And other technology in feeds, manual feeding had been practiced for several years. That has given way to automatic feeders now. Several farms in the country are switching over to auto feeders, which greatly requires the manpower requirement in a farm. Some of these auto feeders are also having solar power based, so that power requirement is also totally minimized. And now we have one of the latest forms of auto feeders is sensor-based feeders, where sensors are placed in water which actually detect the feeding behavior of shrimp. And when the shrimp start feeding, the feed is broadcast into the pond. So this is one of the most advanced system that can actually save a lot of feed that is unnecessarily sometimes broadcast into the ponds. We also have a lot of automatic harvesters, though it has not become very popular in India, but with manpower become a very, very precious commodity. Automatic harvesters will also soon come up in India. A lot of progress has also been made in water quality monitoring. Earlier, we had lab-based titration methods where water had to be collected from individual ponds, taken into a lab, and then all parameters measured using titration methods. That gave way to water test kits, which could measure these parameters. And subsequently, these were replaced with electronic probes. Today, we have multi-parameter meters that can measure several parameters such as dissolved oxygen, salinity, pH, temperature, and ammonia with just a single equipment with multiple probes. And we also have online water quality monitoring system. SMS alerts, these are systems that with probes that remain in water, and as soon as a parameter gets out of range or in a dangerous range, SMS alerts are given to the farm owner or hatchery owner so that immediate rectification can be done. A lot of progress has also been made in disease diagnosis over the years. In 1994, when white spot disease struck shrimp farming, the losses used to be huge, and we never understood until the disease actually struck. So when you see symptoms in an animal, you see white spot on an animal, only then you know that the disease is there. So by then it is usually too late. Sometimes there is mass mortality inside the pond. Sometimes it gives us just enough time to harvest the pond immediately. But now there are disease PCR-based disease diagnostic kits that can detect the presence of disease even at the seed level. So a farmer can check this at the seed level and then decide not to stock the seed if the seed is positive for certain diseases. So because of this, also several biosecurity measures have also come up. Different measures have, specific measures have come up for disease like white spot disease, which prevents, apart from screening seed, also prevents entry of disease carriers into the system by water filtration, water treatment, bird fencing, crab fencing, such measures. So for every specific disease, there are specific biosecurity measures that are put in place in the farming. And perhaps one of the factors that really contributed to the growth in shrimp farming is selective breeding and the development of SPF, SPT, or SPR stocks. You would have heard about SPF stocks yesterday, but now the world is thinking beyond SPF. SPF is specific pathogen-free. SPT or SPR are specific pathogen tolerant. Now there are several breeding companies that are developing shrimps that are tolerant to specific diseases and that are resistant to certain diseases. So that is on the pathogen front. And within selective breeding, you would see a small graph in the slide where you can see how much enhancement in performance has been made in several animals over the years. In chicken, cattle, etc., selective breeding began as early as in the 1940s, and they have made over 300% enhancement in growth or performance over the years. Similarly, for Norwegian salmon, the program started in the 70s. For Vanami, it started in the 90s. GIFS tilapia, it started in the 80s. And all these 3 aquatic species have made tremendous progress in terms of farm performance. So breeding is done for several traits such as fast growth, better reproductive performance, disease resistance, etc. And PCR technology has actually enabled development of SPF stocks quicker. Earlier, whether free from pathogens, it was histopathology that was the main method by which it was ruled out that the pathogens are free from diseases. But now this PCR technology, you can get results within a couple of hours, and then you can make quick progress. So some of the traits that are of interest for farmers in selective breeding are fast growth, and then general high survival rate, reproductive fitness. Actually, hatcheries look for animals that give good breeding performance, high fecundity, good hatchability, and things like that. Farms prefer animals that grow fast, that are resistant to diseases, that have exhibit high survival rate, that exhibit good feed conversion. And the processing people, they look for animals that have got a high dressing percentage, more meat yield in an animal. So all these are factors that are used in a selective breeding program. Another one very big advance that has been made in shrimp aquaculture is actually progress made in microbial biotechnology for the development of probiotics. So probiotics are actually a group of beneficial bacteria that are used in the systems. Several processes in the water, such as organic matter degradation, nitrification, denitrification, all these natural processes are greatly assisted when the system is supported by good quality probiotics. So in addition to this, probiotic bacteria also help in competitive domination. They dominate inside the water system, preventing other bacteria such as Vibrios to enter into the system. And though it was popular early on, it has become more and more prominent in the recent years, primarily because of the antibiotic issue. You would all have heard about the antibiotic issue that is of great discussion in the recent years. So earlier, when hatchery technology or hatchery systems came in the late 80s to India, there was in fact a protocol or a daily protocol wherein certain antibiotics were used on a daily basis or weekly 2 times or 3 times basis as a prophylactic measure. It was also used as a therapeutic measure. So antibiotics were frequently used, and it was considered as a boon for good aquaculture. Subsequently, the issue of antibiotic residues in the flesh of aquatic animals that were reared in aquaculture production systems. Then there was also a case of antimicrobial resistance, and in certain bacteria, the antibiotics that worked initially would not work on the same bacteria after a period of time, because these bacteria would have developed resistance to the antibiotics. Subsequently, there was a transfer of resistance from these bacteria to human pathogens as well. So AMR became an issue of hot discussion in the recent years. So consumer demands like people wanted to have food that was free from antibiotic residues. So all these were the reasons why probiotics had become very, very popular in aquaculture, besides actually contributing to better production, easier to manage systems. So this rapid rise in aquaculture actually over the years presented quite a few problems. There were several farmers who entered into the sector just as a money-making or a quick money-making venture. So several farmers resorted to poorly managing them to make as much money as possible. So all these had adverse impacts on the environment. There used to be crop wastage resulting from poor feed management. Water and creeks used to get polluted. Antibiotic overuse was there. And there was this probably disrupted the local ecosystems. Over the period, over these years, so a lot of changes has also come in the attitude of the consumers. Earlier, it was a question of food availability. It was a question of producing more and more food from the available resources. Now that has given, food is available in plenty, but it is the quality of food that matters now. Consumers want food that pose no health threats. So food that is traceable. They want food that is produced in a very sustainable manner that causes no environmental damage, and that the environment is good for the future generations. Consumers want fish or shrimp that is produced in farms that produce shrimp legally, that is our registered farms following all rules and regulations of the country. And then several consumers also want to know whether the crop is produced well and that it helps the people to prosper, that it gives better livelihood to farmers, and the technology is socially responsible. Farmers and women are empowered. Then about sustainable aquaculture. So this term has come into the picture in the recent past, where everybody is talking about sustainability. Aquaculture should basically not create any significant disruption to the ecosystem. So people want systems that do not cause any kind of pollution or loss of biodiversity or any damage to the ecosystem. Sustainable aquaculture should also be a viable business while taking care of the environmental concern, and it should have long-term good prospects, and it should also contribute to social and community well-being. So how do we achieve sustainability? There are some options. Technological advances have been made. So one system that has very little to do with the environment is the RAS, or recirculation aquaculture system. So for achieving sustainability, systems can move inland instead of being in an open pond-based open system where water is taken in from the creeks and discharged back into the creeks. If you can have recirculation aquaculture systems that are based in land, which use very little quantity of water, only the water that is used initially, and only about 10% is topped up every day, whereas the entire remaining water is recirculated. RAS also allows aquaculture to take place anywhere, including urban areas or the desert. So you could grow shrimp farm in New Delhi or in Bangalore, where which is closer to the major markets, instead of farming all the time in coastal areas and transporting it long distances. So such systems actually are very sustainable. They are capital intensive, but are gaining in popularity. In other parts of the world, it is growing very fast, and I'm sure that very soon in India also, we will have such systems coming up. Then another option for sustainability is moving offshore. We all know that oceans take up about 70% of the world's surface, but it furnishes less than 2% of our food supply. Most of the food that we require, agriculture, meat, everything is grown on the land, on agriculture, through agriculture and animal husbandry. So 70% of the world's resource is left unutilized. So and whatever focus has been done on the coastal area. So and the open ocean is absolutely unutilized. So moving deep into the ocean, the ecosystems in the coastal areas are very fragile, whereas in the ocean it is quite steady, and that can be used for aquaculture activities without much environmental impact. Then you also can have systems such as the IMTA. This is also a very popular term that has come of importance in the recent times, that is integrated multi-tropic aquaculture systems. It is a cost-effective way to reduce nutrient accumulation. Several species are farmed together in the same area, such as shellfish, seaweed, crab, alongside our target species such as salmon or shrimp. So the feed given to salmon or shrimp in the culture system, or the cage, as you see in the picture, the remnants of the feed, the ammonia and that is generated, that can be used by filter feeders, that can be used by seaweeds. So 2 or 3 other species can be obtained without any additional input. So this kind of system becomes very sustainable. So this again is becoming more and more popular all over the world. In India, institutions like the CMFRI have conducted such trials in South Tamil Nadu, in Rameshwaram, Ramanathapuram, Tuticorin areas with a great deal of success. So this also can be adopted. And the change that is needed in India now is, like, you have changing weather patterns because of climate change. So we need better technologies. We also need species diversification. We farm very few species now. We should actually go in for Indian species that are extremely suitable for Indian conditions. So it does not matter whether weather changes a little, but when an Indian species is farmed, it is more conducive. And manpower availability is becoming lesser and lesser over the last several years, with more education, people getting educated and looking for jobs. So automation. Automation is the solution for this, or the answer to this. There are new emerging diseases coming up, so biosecurity, scientific farming. We should also have indigenous SPF or specific pathogen-free domestication programs of indigenous species in India. And then new consumer preferences, we should go for sustainable production. We should also try for domestic marketing, that is the need of the hour. And manpower development is a very important factor that is going to affect aquaculture production in the coming years. Not much people are interested in going outdoors and farming. So most of the people who get educated, they are looking for white-collar jobs, sitting inside an office and working. So, but the potential that aquaculture offers is so enormous that we need to groom the next generation to take up farming. And as I informed before, opportunities in domestic markets, this has to be exploited. India, we are totally dependent on exports now to sell our shrimps. So but India itself is one of the largest markets in the world, and it's unexploited. The GDP is about 7 to 8%. We have about 1 billion people, with 65% of them being 35 years of age. There is growing health consciousness. So there is a lot of awareness on the benefits of seafood and eating seafood among the youth now. The present domestic market consists of wet markets, and there is plenty of scope for several segments of selling fish. We have to make online fish and shrimp available online now, because all the younger generation is depending on online purchases for these food. We also have to provide ready-to-cook and ready-to-eat forms, so that people needn't spend much time on cooking. So species diversification, as I told you, India farms much fewer species than most other leading countries in aquaculture production. Our production is limited to Indian major carps, pacu and pangasius in freshwater, and L. vanami in coastal aquaculture. We have several freshwater and brackish water species available for farming. Hatchery technology is available, but it is not being adopted. Like people go into farm species that give more money only. So there should be focus on crops that are suitable for specific environments. So I think with this, I conclude my presentation. I thank you all for your patience.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I request the participants to kindly post your questions and clarifications if you need any in the chat box, so that will be read out to the speaker so that he will answer. So already few participants have asked some questions. Shall I read out, sir?
Yeah, sure, please.
Sir, one participant has asked, what is the difference between specific pathogen tolerant and specific pathogen resistant?
Actually, when a tolerant animal actually, as I told you before, there are two terms. One is specific pathogen free. So animals can be developed from specific pathogen tolerance or resistance can be developed from SPF stocks. Like in Ecuador, for example, several years back, how resistance to certain diseases was formed is, like, animals were selected, white spot affected animals, that if a pond used to get affected with white spot, and you obviously had a very few animals that remained in the pond without mortality. So those animals were sort of tolerant to the white spot virus, and that is why they survived. So several breeding programs were developed by utilizing ponds from animals from the natural system that were resistant to diseases, and then developed selective programs using these. Modern selective breeding programs, what happens is, how is resistance developed is, like, you have specific pathogen free stocks, and then these SPF stocks are subject to, families of these stocks are subject to exposure to these pathogens. And if the stocks, the families that exhibit resistance, or they do not die, or there is no mortality in those families, so those are carried forward in the selective breeding program to make a separate line are resistant or tolerant to such species.
Sir, what are the pros and cons of composite culture, sir?
You mean to say integrating with other forms, agriculture, or just polyculture of different species?
Polyculture or combined with other agricultural plants, etc. Both. You can explain, please.
This can be done. This can be done. There are several trials and experiments that have been carried out by different organizations scientifically. There are benefits for each kind of system. They are usually environmentally very sustainable. It can be taken up by small-scale farmers and can be managed by them. So for different kinds of production systems, it depends on the infrastructure available, the manpower who's managing. So these are actually very sustainable systems and can be practiced in areas where tribal population is high, who can combine all these activities and do together. So these are all systems that can be practiced in remote areas and have got a very good sustainability.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, tell me, sir. Sachin, sir, you can talk.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Dr. Sachin Taide from Maharashtra.
Good afternoon, sir.
My question is, sir, as far as the shrimp culture is concerned, more manpower will be required, more investment will be required, and therefore the cost of production for the culture type of the shrimp culture will be more. As we see in the capture fishery, we don't have to take any management practice. Simply we have to capture the shrimps which are available in the oceans. But here in the culture system, what will be the cost of production and what will be the cost of sale?
It depends on the culture system, sir. You know, as you know that in capture fisheries, like it is very unstable, or you cannot predict that you are going to catch this amount of fish. So that is not a destination. It's always better to go in for aquaculture, and that is why aquaculture is becoming more and more popular over the years. The cost of production depends on the species that you do. Like for species like tilapia, the cost of production is as low as 50 to 60 rupees a kilo. For shrimp, it depends on the size of the shrimp that you produce. If you want to produce small size shrimp, the cost of production is less. If you want to produce bigger size of shrimp, the cost of production is more. So it all depends on the species that you want to farm and the size or the market, the size of the shrimp or any other fish that you want to produce. So it depends on all these factors. There is no hard and fast rule that the cost of production of something is so and so rupees. So it varies from your system, your species, and your stocking density. So many factors come into play.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sir, one has asked, in today's generation, if polyculture technique is practiced, will that give a good result?
Yes, actually, for better utilization of resources. See, you must have heard that a few years disease called EMS or early mortality syndrome, also called AHPND, that stuck several countries like Thailand, Vietnam, which are yet to recover. But there were some reports in that saying that when they were farming shrimp along with fish such as tilapia, the incidence of disease was greatly reduced. So there are different polyculture patterns. In the shrimp farming scenario, you can culture either shrimp with species such as tilapia, you can culture species such as sanos that also offer that better resistance of for the shrimp against diseases, and that also help in keeping the water quality very clean by eating away uneaten feed, wasted feed, and things like that. So several studies have already been done. Other studies are going on, and distinctly there are several advantages for polyculture systems at certain stocking densities. But if you want to practice very intensive systems, it might not be that very suitable. But for certain semi-intensive or extensive systems, polyculture might be a very good option.
Thank you, sir. And I request the participant to kindly mute your mic. Ms. Maleshwari Devi, please mute your mic.
Charging go. అయిపోతే పోయింది ఛార్జింగ్ ఆన్ చేసిన
Sir, otherwise you can remove her, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have muted her, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Sir, Dr. Aragaraj Ramakrishnan has asked, sir, could you please tell about the antibiotics residues level in the shellfishes in India? Is it safe level or at an alarming level?
No, presently, as you know, there are several restrictions for antibiotic residues imposed or specified by different countries. So whatever shrimp that goes into the export market, in fact, are mostly, I would say that more than 98 or 99% of them is safe. There are very, very few people who break the rules and they try to use antibiotics. There could be some antibiotics that come into the body of shrimp unknowingly by the use of certain products that might inadvertently have antibiotics. So on the whole, but I think our shrimp that is produced in India is generally safe. And the stray cases of antibiotic rejections of containers due to presence of antibiotics, that is very meager when compared to the total volumes exported by India. So I think it is not alarming. It is safe, and consumers need not worry on the whole.
Thank you, sir. I think like many have appreciated you and thanked you, sir. So I'm just checking for the questions.
Thank you so much.
Sir, is composite culture advisable?
I just answered that question a while ago. One person had asked with regard to composite culture.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Sir, RAS systems can only be done near any source of water such as dams, rivers or lakes, or it can be done somewhere else too?
I have mentioned already during my presentation, RAS can be done. If you want to do Vanami farming, you can do RAS farming in New Delhi. You can do it in Bangalore, or you can do it in areas where there is no sea. Suppose you have a big market in Hyderabad, you can have an RAS system in Hyderabad. So RAS system offers that kind of advantage. So there is an initial water requirement and subsequently little quantity that can be replenished. So this system has got several advantages, and one of this is that it need not be necessary near the source of water. Of course, there should be sufficient water of any kind that is required to do farming, but it need not necessarily be near a water body such as a sea or a brackish water creek or anything like that. It can be done inland.
Okay, sir. Sir, one Anis TNFU has asked why mariculture activity is very less in India compared to other countries. Give your suggestions to improve, sir.
One of the reasons why mariculture is not really taken off is because our is subject to several cyclones all through the year, and then we don't have very much calm bays and lagoons like bays like most other countries have, or rocky areas. Some areas where cage culture is possible is near Andaman Islands, where there are lots of islands, and there are areas in between which is relatively calm throughout. But the east coast of India, like the entire coast where you have progressive farmers who would like to do, that is very vulnerable to severe weather. On the west coast, again, you have, though you have some bays, that area is got too much of monsoon. So if you want to do a seawater species in some bay there, during monsoon, the inflow into the area is so high that the entire water in that area becomes low saline water, where farming of certain species might not be possible. So there are some challenges, but I believe that you could do a survey in several areas all over the coast of India, and then identify areas where it is possible and promote mariculture in such areas. So a detailed survey has to be done or taken up by organizations involved in promoting mariculture activities.
Okay, sir. Sir, one more question. How is survival status of WSSV in present Indian shrimp farming, and specifically in Tamil Nadu?
Survival status or status of WSSV?
They have asked what is the survival status of WSSV? Maybe they want to know the status of WSSV.
Yeah, that WSSV is there. WSSV is sort of endemic now. It is there. It is there every year. There is no time when WSSV is not there. So it generally comes during seasons like these, when you have off and on rains, and then you have a spell of good sun. Outbreaks are very common during this time of the year. It is also there during winter months also. But on the whole, like, you have lot of, since most of the seed that comes is SPF, that seeds that are free from WSSV. If your farming area, or suppose a farming area has excellent biosecurity protocols and things like that, the prevalence will be much lesser. But during this season, generally WSSV is quite high. You have lots of outbreaks in Andhra Pradesh that is going on right now. In Tamil Nadu also, I believe during this season it is highly possible for WSSV out.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. One more question. Sir, what are the possibilities of that a pathogen can also infect the humans during this practice?
So far, there are no known aquaculture pathogens that have affected humans. So I think we need not worry about that for the time being.
Okay, sir. Sir, can you please explain about inland shrimp cultivation using water recycling system?
That will take one whole day, actually. Like, to explain in brief, like, there are RAS basically contains one set of systems where you introduce water that is totally filtered and clean and pathogen free, and then you have an aquatic system, and then this aquatic system has got sediment removal, where waste feed and fecal matter, all those things are removed. So all those are removed totally from the system, and the remaining water, which has got dissolved gases such as ammonia and nitrites, ammonia that is excreted through feces and that is developed through uneaten feed. All these are passed through certain biofilters, where bioreactors where a lot of beneficial bacteria are there in the system, which act upon these gases and remove all these from the system. Then you have you provide lot of aeration so that lot of oxidation and removal of other gases such as carbon dioxide takes place. Then you also have foam fractionation or protein skimmers where suspended or dissolved solids are removed from the system. So several systems are there which together forms a recirculation aquaculture system. And then finally this comes back. So this can be established in inland areas. There are several books and articles on RAS systems. In fact, there was one RAS-based nursery that was used in a shrimp hatchery in Marakanam area also, where they produced successful batches of seeds, shrimp seeds. So these are all practically possible and can be done. The investment required is a little high, but if practiced well with technical expertise, it definitely is a great option.
Thank you so much, sir. So, I'm Dean, ma'am. Yes,
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, I think all the questions have been answered by sir. Sir, thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You,
Yes,
sir, post a feedback link and we can continue with the session.
Yes,
sir.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Dear Jaydeep sir, so thanks, and you spared your time and answered all the questions of the participants. So as a formal formality, I would like to read the concluding report of the conclave. Dear participants, I thank Dr. J. Jayanti ma'am, the convener of this 5-day conclave and Dean Research of the Guru Nanak Center for Research, for giving me this opportunity of delivering the report of the 5-day conclave. This Industry Academia Conclave 2020 on aquaculture avenues, opportunities and challenges was conceptualized and given shape by our Dean Research ma'am, who is a strong believer of industry and academia tie-ups and collaborations for the overall development of the institutions and society at large. We got more than 1,000 registrations, and since Google Meet would allow only 250 participants, we had to limit only 250 participants to attend the 5-day conclave. The conclave was inaugurated on 27th July 2020 by our respected principal sir with his welcome address at 2 p.m. and the theme of the conclave was introduced by the convener of the conclave, Dean Research ma'am. The resource person of the first day of the conclave was Dr. A.R.T. Arasu, former head of the Department Fish Culture Division, ICAR SIBA, Chennai, who spoke very clearly and only the facts on the title Coastal Aquaculture Perspective. On the second day, the resource person was Dr. Jitendra Kumar Sundare, Principal Scientist and Head Division of Fish Genetics Biotechnology, ICAR SIFA, Bhubaneswar, Odisha. He spoke on the title Innovative Aquaculture Technologies to Enhance Production. Dr. Sundare covered the need for innovation and proper implementation of the same, the role of and use of genetic engineering in breeding and approving the harvest in aquaculture, the various subsidies and schemes of Government of India for aquaculture, and the consultancy services available for the farmers and people involved in aquaculture. On the third day, the 29th July, the resource person was Sri Vijayan, Incubation Manager, Center for Innovation and Agripreneurship, National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management, Telangana, who spoke about employment and startup opportunities in fisheries. Sri Vijayan gave a clear picture about the various schemes and wide opportunities available for graduates and people who want to pursue aquaculture as a career. He shared the contact details of many successful aquapreneurs to whom we can ask for establishing our own farm. The fourth day, that is yesterday, Dr. M.C. Ramani, Project Manager, Scientific Research, Planning and Management, Aquaculture Quarantine Facility, Rajiv Gandhi Center for Aquaculture, MPEDA, Chennai was the resource person. She gave very clear picture about the working and the various processes that are being conducted for quarantine in the aquaculture quarantine facility at Chennai. And today we had the bliss of listening to Mr. Jaideep, the editor and publisher of Aquaculture Outlook, who gave a very clear picture about the changing trends in aquaculture over times. Sir, we are really impressed, and we were very happy to see your slides and the explanation given to the participants. Thank you very much, sir. Now I request our Dean Research, Dr. J. Jayanti ma'am, to convey the vote of thanks.
So just tell me if I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Yeah. A very good evening to everyone. Dear participants, I deem it an honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks at the valedictory session of the 5-day Industry Academia Conclave 2020 on aquaculture, avenues, opportunities and challenges, organized by the Guru Nanak Center for Research, Guru Nanak College, Velachery, held from 27 July to 31st July 2020. I, as a convener of this Industry Academia Conclave, wish to sincerely thank our management, especially our most revered General Secretary and Correspondent, Mr. Manjit Singh Nair, our respected Principal, Dr. M.G. Raghunathan sir, for the constant support, guidance for the planning and execution of this Industry Academia Conclave. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the resource persons for all the 5 days, especially Dr. A.R.T. Arasu, Dr. Jitendra Kumar Sundaresh, Sri Vijayan, Dr. M.C. Ramani, and our today's resource person, Mr. Jaideep Kumar, for having accepted our invitation and sparing their valuable time and enormous knowledge and experience with us. The speaker of today's valedictory session, Mr. Jaideep, editor and publisher, Aquaculture Outlook, gave a wonderful and expansive view on the scenario of aquaculture at the global and the Indian level. He has given an overall view of all the different agencies involved in aquaculture promotion and where this field is heading in future. Thank you, sir. We are indeed grateful to you for having accepted to share your expertise in this conclave. A very special thank you, sir. Thanks to Dr. Avai Kodai ma'am, Associate Professor and Head, PG and Research Department of Commerce, for gracing the occasion and delivering the welcome address. Dr. L.R.S. Kalanidhi, Vice Principal Students Affairs, Dean Academics, Dr. Savitri, Dean School of Sciences, Dr. Noor Jahan, Dean of various schools, heads and faculty members of various departments of our college for their active participation and the support shown for the conclave. My congratulations to the organizing secretary of this conclave, Dr. Venu, who had meticulously organized the conclave between the academicians and the industry personnel. I owe my sincere thanks to Dr. Mahendra Kumar, the coordinator of this program, for his untiring work and his support to all the activities of Guru Nanak Center for Research, especially for arranging all the logistics pertaining to this program. We have been a pillar of support to this conclave, but for him, this program would not have seen such a smooth sail. Thank you, sir. Thanks to Dr. Shamila for the technical support for this conclave, Dr. Shivakumar in assisting and coordinating the program with the organizing secretary, Dr. Venu, Dr. Bhuneshwari for volunteering and supporting us. I would fail in duty if I will not thank the wonderful and the interactive audience we had for all these 5 days, who showed keen interest in all the sessions of the conclave and made this conclave a very grand success. Thank you, one and all. Thank you very much.
Want to know more about these topics? Please follow us at Guru Nanak Center for Research YouTube page, Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe our channel. Thank you.